and welcome to Open Minds, Open Hearts. This is session 5, Impermanence and Embracing Challenging Changes. So thank you for all that joined me for this. I know it's can be a bit of a challenging topic when we think about impermanence and constant change. But really, I hope through this session and through these reflections, you find that it really is a doorway to unlock a whole other side of life, the decay, the ending parts of life in a new way that starts to liberate us from some of the feelings and emotions that we hold around kind of the decay or the death of things. But before we do that, a few housekeeping items. In case you missed session 4, I put that up on YouTube. We talked about the practice of OM and using settling sounds to find greater peace. So take a look at the Open Minds, Open Hearts YouTube channel for that. Also known as OMOH, O-M-O-H. You can find me on YouTube there. As always, these sessions are free of charge. If you'd like to donate, it's always appreciated. And my Venmo and PayPal information is in my emails and also in the descriptions of my YouTube videos. And of course, as always, if you have friends, family, coworkers that you think could benefit from more meditation, more mindfulness, and you'd like them to come along to these sessions, feel free to invite them or send them my email, dustin@openmindsopenhearts.org. I'd love to have them join us. It's always great to have new folks in the circle. Great. So with that, I'm going to share a brief presentation, and then we can do a guided meditation. Okay. So let's see here. Okay. So today I wanted to talk with you guys about impermanence and really, impermanence, embracing challenging changes. This is very relevant for, I'm sure, many of you, particularly as we navigate COVID-19 and the implications that brings upon us, whether from a financial standpoint or a health and wellness standpoint. I think we're all a little bit more mindful about our mortality right now. And in Buddhism, impermanence is a really unique teaching that is a foundation, a foundational practice. It comes from the Pali word anicca, and essentially it means non-permanent, that we live in a state of constant change, that whether it's the material world or our thoughts, our feelings, these things are constantly changing, and there's a beginning and there's an end. And I think particularly in the West, we tend to really focus on the beginning and the graph going up, and we don't like to talk about the descent. We don't like talking about the decay or the aging, the illness, our deaths. We prefer to kind of sweep those things under the rug as darker parts of life that we just don't want to go there. And this practice of impermanence is, I say it's a practice because it's an invitation to begin to question those narratives around the end of a job, the end of a relationship, or even a life, and begin to reframe these and start to see the new life that emerges from the death, the new door of opportunity that emerges when one door, one job, one relationship closes, another one begins. And so, this does go inherently against our human nature, right? Which makes it so difficult. Um, we've evolved to try to control our environment. From the Stone Ages, we've lived in caves and we've fought against nature to build fire and to protect ourselves. We created agriculture, we created technologies so that we weren't so forced to be at the whims of Mother Nature. And I think we can all agree that there's certain benefits of not accepting the way things are. Especially if we think about social injustice or racism, there's causes in which we do want to resist and we do want to fight for a better tomorrow. But impermanence is really looking at those things that we just can't control, like aging, like getting sick, like dying. So it's really embracing those things that we can't control and allowing this river of life to flow so that we're not fighting to go upstream, but we're going along for the ride with the path of least resistance. And so, reflections on death is probably one of the harder ones. It's not something we really strive to do on a regular basis, think about death. But the Buddha actually had his students meditate right in front of rotting corpses. There's a practice in India at the time in which bodies were left out to decompose with the elements. And so Buddha would have his students sit in front of these corpses and meditate and really observe the body as it decayed. And the wisdom behind this is that you begin to see your own mortality. You see that this body that we often put on this pedestal can so easily return back to the dust from whence it came. And I'm not going to have you guys meditate on dead bodies today, so don't worry about that. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in this practice. And I think about my own experience with people passing on, particularly my grandmother who passed several years ago. And I remember several months before she passed, my first daughter was born. And I really wanted my first daughter to meet my grandmother. And I tried to kind of plan a trip, and it all kind of fell through. And so I remember being kind of disappointed about the woulda, coulda, shouldas after my grandmother had passed. But I was meditating and praying after she did pass, kind of just thinking about her, thinking about my grandfather who had passed many years before that from Alzheimer's. But the love that they shared was just so pure. And I remember even as a child that watching them dance together was one of the greatest joys I had experienced as a child, because their connection when they were dancing was so honest and loving. And I could tell even in their older years, they maintained a certain level of passion in their relationship. And as I was meditating, I had this startling and strong image of my grandparents dancing together in heaven, amongst the clouds. And that same feeling of love and connection, I could really feel my grandmother telling me that not only was she okay, but she was at peace because she had reconnected with my grandfather and they were dancing in eternal bliss. And it was a feeling that was just so real. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck raising up, and I knew that this was her truth and she was in a better place. And so this is one example of the power of reflecting on impermanence and perhaps what we see is a bad situation may not be as bad as we might think. So we're gonna set an intention. We're going to talk about some inspired writings. We'll talk a little bit about some of the background around impermanence, some science around it, and then we'll do a guided meditation. Great. So, open intention. All right. So let's take a minute to set an intention for today's session. It could be keeping an open mind about contemplating impermanence. My intention is to let go of how I think things should be and accept them for how they are. My intention is to embrace my challenges as opportunities of growth. Those are some examples, but take a minute to reflect on what your intention is for today's session and moving forward, reflecting on impermanence and the constant changing of our lives and our world. And I hope you've had a moment for an intention to come to you. So hold on to that. Okay, so some words of inspiration. I start with Thich Nhat Hanh, who is potentially one of the most influential Buddhist thinkers of the 20th century. And he said, "It is not impermanence that makes us suffer. What makes us suffer is wanting things to be permanent when they are not." And I love this quote because, yeah, you know, it's not the fact that there's death that we're sad, right? It's more of our attachment to our ideas around death or the end of something. We want things to be permanent. We don't want things to change. We have this set idea of something in our head, whether it's a person, place, or thing. And when it changes, it can often be alarming. But Thich Nhat Hanh, he's saying that it's that attachment to that idea of how something's supposed to be, that's what's making us suffer. And so when we can let go of that attachment to that idea, that's when we're truly able to find liberation. William Braxton Irvine said, "By contemplating the impermanence of everything in the world, we're forced to recognize that every time we do something, it could be the last time we do it. And this recognition can invest the things we do with a significance and intensity that would otherwise be absent. We will no longer sleepwalk through our life." And again, I love this because this is carpe diem, right? This is to seize the day, to be mindful in every moment. You know, can we bring mindfulness and presence to every moment? That's really the goal, right? And finally, the Buddha says, "Better it is to live one day seeing the rise and fall of things than to live 100 years without ever seeing the rise and fall of things." And this is really profound. The rise and fall of things. You know, I mean, it really is noting that when we try to avoid difficult issues, when we try to avoid the end of a career, a life, a moment, an experience, an emotion, when we hold on with a grasp and don't want to let go, we're not fully being present in our lives. And I think that's what the Buddha is saying, is if we can see the rise and the fall and accept both for what they are, we find true liberation in our day-to-day. So I hope you found some insights there. So a few notes on the term impermanence. So unicca, hopefully I'm pronouncing that poly word correctly. That is the term for impermanence. So like I said before, the A means non, and the nicca means permanent, so non-permanent. Everything is changing. Conditioned existence is transient, it's inconstant. Everything is in flux. Whether that's a material thing, a mental or emotional object, all of these things are arising and falling and in a continuous state of change, right? And so this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, known as reincarnation or samsara, is integral to the Buddhist teachings, with the liberation from samsara being nirvana, in reaching this state of nirvana, which is essentially liberation from the ego, greed, hate, ignorance, and really finding enlightenment either while on earth or in the afterlife. But we don't have to wait for an afterlife to come and find peace with impermanence. Attachment to impermanent things leads to suffering. And so we can start there. We can start with our attachments to these things that are constantly changing. And so, in the Buddhist teachings, that practice is by following the Noble Eightfold Path. So right view, right mindfulness, right action. There's 8 different steps that we can take to be aware of how we can liberate ourselves from the nature of impermanence. So there are certainly pathways and hope for us yet. I won't go into the Eightfold Path today, but I highly recommend you do more learning on it, as it truly is noble and enlightening, just learning about the Eightfold Path. And it is a central tenet of Buddhist teachings as well. Now, jumping ahead to a kind of science-based view of destruction, I wanted to talk about forest fires, because I was recently in Yosemite and I was reflecting a lot on forests and fires. And when we see this image to the right, it's hard not to be startled and upset by seeing a forest aflame. Especially here in California, we have a history of these deadly fires, and when they get out of control, it's by no means healthy for the forest. But through evolution, naturally occurring fires in forests are a part of that ecosystem. And ultimately, those fires, they turn the dead trees into decaying plant matter. They go from ashes into new nutrients that are then available in the soil for new growth. So as these large trees are shading the forest floor, not allowing new growth to occur, by these fires happening, new light and nutrients are now hitting the forest floor, as well as killing things like weeds or eliminating diseases through insects, all of which give room for new growth, new flowers and plants and trees to all be born and to grow. And there was a study in Tallahassee, Florida, that studied, for many, many decades, they studied a piece of land that had no controlled burning or natural burning. And what they found was the plant diversity fell by 90%. And there was an extinction of a bird, a woodpecker. So these these fires naturally clear out the old to make way for the new. And I think that that's an apt metaphor for how we're all navigating the pandemic and the current stresses of our daily lives. And I wanted to just share my own reflection on that because I was in Yosemite, this beautiful, serene place. And the first day of my vacation, I got an unfortunate call from my boss's boss. I work in the tech industry, which has been heavily impacted by COVID-19. And I got an unfortunate call that 3 of my 5 team members were going to be furloughed the following week. And I've been with this company for 4.5 years. I've spent many years building the team there. And needless to say, it was a big blow to manage, particularly the first day of your vacation. But I really realized it was time to reflect on impermanence. And so I found this incredible spot. This was the spot that I was meditating at and reflecting upon a forest. I found this great rock, which had a nice, perfect seat for sitting. And as I was sitting on this rock overlooking the hillside, I began to notice that this hill, the forest it appeared to be burned. And it looked like there was a forest fire that had caused havoc on this forest. And as I investigated closer, I could see that, in fact, this forest had been through a deadly fire back in 2018, which had burnt much of the hillside. But I could also see that there's a lot of new growth on the forest floor. I could see new bushes and trees and plants growing below these dead trees. And I also could see that there was a memorial dedicated to 2 firefighters that had lost their lives battling these flames, and the sacrifice of these firefighters. And I reflected upon my own situation, and it's difficult as it was to get that news about my colleagues and about my current job being very fluid and impermanent. Nobody had died. Nobody had gotten sick or terminally ill. Our careers had been disrupted, but there was still hope. There's still new opportunities on the horizon, and that gave me hope. And as I began to walk back to the cabin, I noticed that the forest floor is just full of dead leaves and dead pine needles. And it was really kind of illuminating because as I continued to walk on this forest path, I could see dead plant life all around me. Many of the trees had been destroyed from termite damage. And there was just dead plants all throughout the forest floor. And it really just kind of reminded me that life and death in nature are a simultaneous process that are always working in unison. It's a cycle. And so it's not something to be afraid of or scared of. It is part of life. It is part of nature in all matter. And ultimately, it is to give birth to this new beginning, right? To a new opportunity, to a new chapter, to a new life. These ideas, these jobs, lives, we hold on to them dearly, and we have this idea that they're not going to change. But when we're able to embrace that change, we are welcomed with this new beginning. So with that in mind, I'd like us now to go ahead and get ready to do a meditation. And let's go ahead, get in a comfortable seat. And I'm going to just cue up some music here. All right. Let's get that queued up. Great. And let us begin. So go ahead and find a comfortable seat in a relaxed position. If you're sitting in a chair, go ahead and have your feet firmly planted on the ground. If you're seated on the ground, hopefully you have some back support, something where you can ease in for about 20 minutes. And today, we're going to reflect upon impermanence, the ever-changing nature of our own lives and the world around us. And let's go ahead and get started with 3 deep breaths. So let's do a deep breath in through the nose and filling up the diaphragm, and release. Release through the mouth, diaphragm decompressing, and a deep breath in through the nose and release. Letting that belly touch the back of our spine, and a deep breath in through the nose, filling up the diaphragm, and release. Letting that breath decompress. All right, so on this 4th breath, I'd like us to hold the breath for a little bit. So let's see, work with me here and see how long you can hold your breath for. Okay, so let's do a deep breath in and hold the breath. Hold the breath and not let go, not exhaling, just holding on to that breath, grasping to that one breath, not letting it go. If you're feeling, if you really want to let it go, go ahead and let that breath go. So how was that for you guys? I hope you could see what I was doing there. When we don't let go of the breath, it becomes really difficult and uncomfortable in that moment, right? We can feel like we're suffocating. We're not allowing that natural process of the in and the out breath to occur. And when we hold on to an ever-changing world, when we don't accept impermanence, it's kind of like holding on to that breath. It's not pleasant. We may think that we're doing the right thing by holding on to our ideals and our idea about how something should be, but it's really holding us back. And if we think of life as a river, we want to be able to flow with the river. We don't want to battle the river, fighting to go upstream. We want to be at one, in peace with this river. Now, that's not to say that we don't navigate the river. We also want to avoid hitting rocks and obstacles in our way. But ultimately, we know that we cannot control this river of life. And so we submit our will to be flexible, to be open to the changes and currents in our lives. Sometimes we like to go on the side of the river where maybe there's a calmer pool. Sometimes we need a break. We need an escape. We need some flat water for a while. And that's okay for a little bit. But if we stay in that stagnant water too long, we get stagnated ourselves. And so this river of life really is urging us to continue flowing with it, not against it. And in this practice of impermanence, this is our opportunity to reflect upon the ever-changing world around us, to reflect upon the ending of moments, experiences, or life itself, to just allow that to be, to just accept it without judgment. And one way that we can do this is through a Buddhist practice called the 5 remembrances. And these are 5 remembrances around impermanence that when we reflect upon them, it helps give us a greater sense of meaning and also a greater sense of how we can live more fully present in the moment to enjoy the things, the impermanent things in our life. So this first remembrance is, I am sure to become old. I cannot avoid aging. So just take a moment to reflect on aging, getting older, without judgment about the health issues or the wrinkles, but just kind of accepting that yes, aging is occurring. And can you just allow that to be without judging yourself or your current condition or the state of your body? Can you just accept that you're aging and show a little compassion to yourself? Now, the second remembrance is, I'm sure to become ill, I cannot avoid illness. And yes, we can all work to be healthier, happier, but illness will befall us all at some point. Some of us may even contract COVID-19 or another disease. Some of us maybe have already battled some of those things. And without going into the fear or the judgment or how bad we think these things are, can we just be with the idea that yes, I will get sick. Maybe not today, but at some point. And that's okay. I accept that I am impermanent and that I will get ill. Which brings us to the third remembrance around our own mortality. I am sure that I will die. I cannot avoid death. And as much as we often want to hold on to our lives, at some point there will be an end. And if you believe in an afterlife, perhaps your soul will continue on. But even if you don't, there is a power in reflecting upon the end of our lives, because it really gives us a new sense of urgency to live fully present in this moment, right now. Helps us really kind of reprioritize our lives when we reflect upon what the end might be and how it could come at any time. And that's okay. It can be scary and uncertain, but it will happen, and I accept that. I accept that I will die and pass on from this life. And the fourth remembrance is that one day I will be separated from all that is dear and beloved to me. So whether that is things like a house or a job or a piece of technology, or whether it's loved pets or family or friend, these things too will one day not be in our lives in the same way. And that's okay. It's okay to accept that, yes, the things that I love are impermanent as well. The people that I love are impermanent. And that's okay. I may not like it, but I do have to accept that this is the truth. So may I reflect and practice this to be more fully present with the impermanence of my loved possessions and people. And the fifth remembrance is around our actions. And our actions are also impermanent. There's a beginning and an end to our actions. But our actions really hold a special power in that they have a reverberation effect, particularly in the way that we treat others. So our actions may be just a moment, but their effects can last a lifetime. And so we remember that our actions are powerful, and we reap what we sow. So if we reap love and virtue, we cultivate more love and virtue in our lives. If we reap ignorance, arrogance, greed, we reap more of those attributes in our lives. But there is all coming and going of these effects, these consequences. And so even if we've chosen actions that weren't very healthy for us in the past, we have a new opportunity to choose new actions that are going to allow us to find greater loving awareness for ourselves and others without judgment, without heavy expectations. So this is why we reflect upon our actions. And as we take some time to just reflect upon any aspect of impermanence that is coming up for us in this moment, whether it's a person, place, or thing, any attachments that we're holding on to, about how we expect things to stay the same, but they keep changing. I'd like to invite you into this river of life, to stop fighting to swim upstream, but to accept the currents of this river and to flow with it for a while and see where it may lead. Though there may be uncertainty ahead, there may be rocks and obstacles for you to maneuver around. Know that this river ultimately is leading you to an ocean of unlimited awareness, leading you to an ocean of limitless possibilities, limitless lives and opportunities from which the universe is here to support you on your path. This ocean of loving awareness, that we are this ocean of loving awareness on this river to connect back to our source. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. I embrace the ever-changing world around me. I embrace the impermanence of all things. And as I embrace the rise and fall, I'm at peace from judging the world and how I think it should be, and rather accepting this river, this ocean of life for how it truly is. Ever changing, ever expanding, ever present. I flow in this river of life liberated from my attachments and my sufferings. Take a minute, start to come back to the room. You can slowly start to open your eyes. Perhaps you want to do a few shoulder rolls back. Embrace the changing nature of your body. Maybe I always like to do a few neck rolls side to side. Work out some kinks from sitting. Thank you. Namaste.